Hello and hello. Welcome back to the Undisputed Champ YouTube boxing channel. If you like the videos I've put out, please hit the subscribe button, please hit the like button, and also if you could, please share the videos. And let's get into the video of today. Today we're talking about a series that I started this channel with and one that I definitely want to continue, and that is the Ring Magazine Top 10s. This is where I go down a weight division ranked by the Ring Magazine, and I'll just give you my musings and my points about the people that are ranked in the division and if they're maximising their careers or not. So today we're going to do the welterweights. The welterweight division is a division that is one of the most historic in boxing. I would say lightweight, welterweight, middleweight and heavyweight. Those four divisions are always hot in boxing. They've always got named fighters in boxing, and boxers try and alter their weight so they can reach these divisions. So if boxers are maybe naturally too big for lightweight, they might try and shrink down to get into the lightweight division, or if they're too small for welterweight, they might pack on some pounds to get to the welterweight division, and same for middleweight and same for heavyweight. And yeah, it's a division that's always been interesting. It's had some of the most interesting boxers of all time in the division. People like Sugar Ray Robinson, people like Henry Armstrong, people like Sugar Ray Leonard, people like Tommy Hearns, people like Floyd Mayweather Jr., people like Manny Pacquiao. These boxers are some of the ATGs in the sport, and for them to fight in the welterweight division has given it notoriety and it's given it substance. So we're doing the welterweights today, and let's get into this. Disclaimer, before I dive into the 10, I don't actually agree with where Ring Magazine has certain fighters. Overall, I think I agree with the fighters on the list, but I don't actually agree where they are placed. And I use Ring Magazine's rankings because I just think the sanctioning body's rankings are just so biased, and they just have so much issues with where people are ranked, people paying for rankings, people doing this and that, and at least Ring Magazine sort of gets rid of that issue. So we're using Ring Magazine today, and if someone knows of a much more complete ranking and a much more unbiased ranking system, please send it to me and I'll think about using those. Ring Magazine rank their fighters, they have a champion and then they have a 1 to 10. But in the Ring Magazine ranking, and I agree with them, the best haven't actually fought the best yet, and so they've got the champion spot as vacant. And so we can just go straight into number 1. And number 1 is Errol the Truth Spence. He's the current IBF and WBC welterweight champion of the world. He's got a record of 26 wins, 27 wins now, 0 losses and 0 draws. Errol Spence, he's an intriguing fighter. And when he was coming up in the game, he was building his name. He actually came through the amateur system in America. He went to the Olympics. Unfortunately, he didn't pick up a medal. But yeah, when he turned pro, he was coming up. I was telling people about this guy. I was like, everybody, get on to Errol Spence. I was telling my boxing friends. I was telling some people who didn't even like boxing, like, you need to watch this guy. You need to watch this guy. He's a solid fighter. He's straight up and down. He's solid. He delivers his punches well as his southpaw, and he's got heavyish hands. And he attacks the body. Like, you need to get onto this guy early. Get onto this guy early. And I was screaming his name. And a couple of people listened to me. Obviously, a couple of people didn't. But the fight that really sold a lot of people on Errol Spence and vindicated me, bigging him up, was the Leonard Bundu fight. Leonard Bundu had been a tricky, tough operator in the welterweight division, but Errol Spence just ran through him, put a beat down on him, and then cleaned him out with a solid left hand. And I was like, yep, he's arrived, he's here. Errol Spence is here. He's here to take over the welterweight division. And he used to say strap season a lot. Strap season obviously referring to the belt strap. And he'd finish the fight and he'd do a signal around his waist and he'd be like, strap season, I'm coming for all the straps. And I used to love that. And then when I actually think about his best win is probably the Kell Brook fight. He's got decent wins on his record, to be fair to him. He's got a win over Sean Porter, he's got a win over Kell Brook, and he's got a win over Danny Garcia, all good wins. But I would probably say the Kell Brook fight was his best win, and he didn't even perform to his best in the fight. Like, I have to give him a lot of props because he went into Kell Brook's backyard. Kell Brook even though he was coming off a loss from GGG and moving that down to welterweight, Kell Brook had this fight at Sheffield United Football Stadium, Bramall Lane. I think it seats over 35,000, outdoor arena, all his fans in his hometown. That's an intimidating atmosphere to walk into, and you've got to be a very strong-minded man. You've got to be a tough man to walk into an atmosphere like that. And Errol was. He went there with a small team. He put America on his back. He walked in there to go and win his first belt against the champion, and he did exactly that. Kell Brook was outboxing him and was matching Errol very well, because even though Errol's a big welterweight, so is Kell. So Kell was holding his own there strength-wise, and I think he was outpointing Errol a bit. But as the fight ground down, as the fight went on, Errol just ground him down, worked his body, worked his head, and he beat the will out of Kell Brook. He beat the will out of him. After beating the will out of him, he cracked his orbital bone, and Kell Brook tucked it in and said, "No more. I don't want any more of this." And Errol went out there, took the belt, and went home. And yeah, strap season was here. He picked up his first strap. Another thing that jumps out to me about that fight is he walked out to a Ring song. I'm going to put the link to the description of the song in the bio. Put the link of the song in the description box, my bad. And I always forget the title, but basically it just talks about, and the main lyrics of the song is, "I'm trying to get to that money." And that's what he was trying to do. He was going to England, he was going to Sheffield, and he was trying to get to that money, pick up the belt and get to that money, and he did exactly that. And I just love that. I love the confidence that he came with. Even though he didn't fight his best fight that I've seen him fight, he did enough to win the fight. And beautiful, beautiful, beautiful performance. Errol, he's going through a thing that a lot of American fighters go through when they, in their mind, perceive that they've reached the top of the mountain, and then they start to cool off and they lose their hunger. And I think that's what happened to Errol. On Errol's way up, he was screaming strap season. He was screaming, "I want all the belts. I'm coming for everyone. No slacking, no time off." And unfortunately, he has slacked and he has taken time off. Even though he's not lost any fights, I'd probably say his hardest fight was the Sean Porter fight. I had Sean Porter winning the fight by 1 point. I'm not going to say it's robbery that it went Errol's way, because Errol won it on a split decision and he did get knocked down late. But I had Sean winning by 1 point, and I thought he didn't perform well in that fight at all. Lo and behold, he had weight issues, trying to make the weight for the fight. He'd been partying with Adrian Broner and co before the fight, and this is not the life you need to live. Boxing is such a short career as a professional athlete, and even though boxers do fight on for long and maybe way past their primes, it's a short prime you have. Very short prime. Every fight you have takes a little bit off you. So if you don't prepare and you don't diligently put it all in for the fights in your prime, you're cheating yourself. You're cheating yourself. Errol, he's not a young man anymore. He needs to give his all to boxing. If he does that for 10 years, 10, 12 years, gives it his all to boxing, he'll maximise the money he can make. He won't have to fight way beyond his years. He won't have to do things that boxers always do, trying to come out of retirement because you've got bills to pay. No, maximise your career now while you're in your prime, Errol. And it's just a shame that he started to slip, and I just hate when I see it. But anyway, he went through a devastating car crash. Thank God, because he made what looks like a full recovery. And we'll see what happens with Errol now. Obviously, he fought Danny Garcia on his comeback fight. He got the win there. And we'll see. We'll see if he still has that hunger. We'll see if he still has that lion heart to continue boxing at the highest level, because it's not easy. And it's not easy. And if you're not dedicated, boxing will always find you out. It's never failed up until now. Moving on to number 2, we have Terence "Bud" Crawford. He's the current WBO World Welterweight Champion. He has a record of 37 wins, 0 losses, and 0 draws. Terence is actually one of my favourite fighters. Not just because of the way he fights, but it's the way he treats the sport. As you've just heard me going in a little bit on Errol Spence, Terence is completely different to that, because he's dedicated himself to the sport. When he reached the top of the mountain, he looked for bigger and better challenges. And I haven't heard stories of Terence being caught up with the police. I haven't heard stories of Terence being drinking with Adrian Broner, being lost in the source of being a champion. All I've heard from Terence is, okay, I've done this, I've completed this, where's the next challenge? Where's the next goal? And I love to see that. Terence's best win is probably also Kell Brook. And this is the slight criticism against Terence, which I do understand and hear. Terence, even though he's done great things in the sport, he's been an undisputed champion at junior welterweight, something we love to see. We love to hear someone who's picked up all the belts and can call themselves the number one in the division. And that's why we're named the undisputed champ, because that's the pinnacle and that's what we want in boxing. And he's done that at a lighter weight. He's been a champion at lightweight and he's now a champion at welterweight. But people say he's not fought hard competition. Even though he's fought the best in the two lower divisions that he could have fought at the time, the criticism is that they're not going to go down as great fighters. And that's a legitimate criticism. And that's why probably Terence's best win at welterweight anyway is Kell Brook. And this is a Kell Brook that had already come off a loss to GGG, had already come off a loss against Errol Spence, had both his orbital bones broken, and looked like he lost the hunger a little bit. But anyway, all you can do is beat what's in front of you, and Terence got the job done. He knocked out Kell Brook quicker than Gennady Golovkin did at middleweight, quicker than Errol Spence did, and it's a good win. So I'll give him his props for that. I'd say the most enjoyable win for me, though, was the Julius Indongo fight. And that is where he landed a peach of a body shot on Indongo. And that was for the undisputed title at junior welterweight. That body shot is just beautiful to me. He just sinks it in there, and Indongo can't do anything. He's just reeling on the floor. He can't get up, and it's one of my favourite knockouts. And I implore you guys to, if you've got time, go and watch that. You can watch the whole fight because the whole fight's not even that long. But just wait for him to sink that body shot in there, and it'll make you want to just go out wherever you are, get on a heavy bag and start landing body shots just because of the effect it had. He's not actually had a loss, and he's not really had too many really tough fights where you thought, oh, this is looking a bit sticky for Terence. He fought a guy recently as one of his mandatories. I can't actually pronounce the name, so I'm going to call him by his moniker. And his moniker is Mean Machine. And Mean Machine looked like he dropped Terence, but the referee didn't count it. But then Terence proceeded to put an arse whooping on my guy, and he was hurting Mean Machine in there and eventually got him out of there. And then the Gamboa fight was quite tough for Terence as well. Down at lightweight, he looked like he was cruising through the fight, but then Gamboa has some of the fastest hands I think I've ever seen, and he landed on Terence and hurt him. But then Terence managed to, I've never really seen it before, but he managed to increase his hand speed to match Gamboa, which is very impressive, and yeah, proceeded to hurt Gamboa, get Gamboa out of there. So let's see with Terence. What I really want is Errol and Terence to fight. I don't want to hear excuses. I don't want to hear purse bid issues, money issues. I don't want to hear any of that. I want to see those two, the number one and number two in the welterweight division, get it on. You can fight for that Ring Magazine title. You can consolidate the 3 belts, and you can call yourself the number one in the division if you get that fight on. So that's what I want to see. And at the moment, I think personally, Errol's making a bit more excuses than Terence. But anyway, let's just see the fight. Fingers crossed, guys, we get that fight very, very soon while they're both in their primes. We don't want to see the fight 5 or 10 years later down the line. We don't want the Manny Pacquiao Mayweather issues popping up again. Talking of Manny Pacquiao Mayweather issues, number 3 on our list is a legendary fighter. He's a fighter that you can put down with the likes of fighters who fought 100 fights, 200 fights, who have records of 170, 44 and 18, fighters like that, fighters who fought 15 rounds, fighters who fought unlimited rounds. You can put him in that category of fighters, and that is Manny Pac-Man Pacquiao. Manny Pacquiao, I don't even know where to begin. A guy who started his boxing career at flyweight and ended up at junior middleweight. That's incredible, guys. That is incredible, guys. Flyweight to junior middleweight. Who's doing that? Who is doing that? Like, it's just insane when you really think about it. It's just insane. Obviously, there are the criticisms that it's so insane he couldn't have done it alone, and he's had a bit of extra help via allegedly using PDs. But all we can do is go off the fact he's not failed any drug tests thus far, and that's the proviso we're going to go on. So yeah, incredible achievement from Pacquiao to do that. He's the current WBA World Welterweight Champion. He has a record of 62 fights, 7 losses and 2 draws. And he's got 7 losses because he tried to fight all the tough guys in his divisions at the time. Got climbing through all those divisions. And he's avenged some of the losses. Manny Pacquiao's a great fighter. He's an all-time great fighter. That's all I'm going to say. He's an all-time great fighter. His best wins, he's got so many wins to pick from. So many amazing wins to pick from. Pereira wins. Marquez wins. But I would probably say the most impressive wins to me were probably the Margarito fight that he had at junior middleweight. I think it was a catch weight of 152 pounds. But for him to beat Margarito, who was a huge welterweight and still a big junior middleweight, that's an amazing win, guys. And he didn't just beat him, he stopped him. That is an amazing win. I think he smashed Margarito's eyes to absolute shreds. And Margarito never the same again after that. That is an amazing win, guys. It's just an amazing win. And Manny Pacquiao doing great things. And then even the Oscar fight. People thought Oscar was going to kill Manny Pacquiao. People thought Oscar was going to put Manny Pacquiao in the grave. And then Manny Pacquiao went out there. This was at welterweight. And body bagged Oscar. He made Oscar quit. Oh, beat up Oscar even. So he great wins. Great wins. I know people say in hindsight, oh, Oscar was weight drained, etc., etc. But Oscar was the A side in that fight. So if the A side is going to weight drain himself, that's on him. You can't blame Manny Pacquiao for that. So yeah, amazing career. I would say his biggest loss, and yeah, this is a devastating loss, an absolutely devastating loss, was his 4th fight to Marquez. Before we dive into that loss, who in this day and age is fighting people 4 times? Come on, guys. Let's put Manny Pacquiao, just all-time great fighter. He could fight in any era. But anyway, back to the loss. He's on his 4th fight with Marquez. Marquez is a great counter puncher, and he'd been learning through all the Manny Pacquiao fights of being robbed, being close fights, being on the wrong decision of fights, being on the right decision of the fights. And in this one, Manny Pacquiao's leaped in and Marquez has caught him with a beautiful counter punch, beautiful, right on the chin. And Manny Pacquiao just went to sleep. I think his eyes may have even shot while he was falling. But yeah, just went straight to sleep and was slumped on the floor, not moving. People were scared. People were worried. If you go back to the fight and you listen to Larry Merchant's the tone in his voice, it's not funny because Manny Pacquiao was in a bad way, but it's comical because of the reaction that Larry Merchant had, as if Manny Pacquiao was his son. And yeah, devastating knockout. I was very surprised to see Manny Pacquiao come back from that, and that shows you the grit of the man to come back from a knockout like that. Marquez, there were some people saying allegedly that he may have been on performance enhancing drugs for the fact because he came from lightweight and to carry such crazy power to knock Manny Pacquiao out like that, and he had a lot of acne on his back as well. But he didn't fail any drug tests, so I'm going to go into proviso that he was clean, and it was a clean knockout and a great win for him. Next on the list is a fighter who's changed over the years, and he kind of links back to what I was saying about Errol Spence, about fighters losing their hunger. And that is Keith, one-time Thurman. He's got a record of 29 wins, 1 loss, and 0 draws. Keith Thurman, on the way up, he looked a bit like a monster. He was getting knockouts, he was getting knockdowns, and his moniker one time was because he was landing his big punch on you one time and it was getting the job done. But he just lost his hunger, man. He lost his hunger. His best wins are probably either the Sean Porter or the Danny Garcia fight. Both close fights, but because Sean Porter and Danny Garcia are classed as top welterweights, I think that will probably go down in his best win. And especially in the Sean Porter fight, Sean Porter gave him all he could handle in that fight, and Keith Thurman stood in there. He kept his balance, he kept his structure, and he was able to get his shots off a little bit more effectively than Sean. So it was a good win. It was a good win. And that was for the WBC title, and he'd already held the WBA title at the time of that fight, so it was a unification. So it was a good win. One thing I would say though is I'm very disappointed in the way Keith Thurman's career the direction it's going in now. On the come up, Keith used to go to press conferences. He has a famous line where I think he's talking to Amir Khan and he goes, "You better not duck me, son. You better not duck me, son." I want that Keith Thurman back. The Keith Thurman that's screaming for opponents. I remember him screaming out for the Floyd Mayweather fight. He was saying that he would beat Floyd, he would knock Floyd out. He's got the power to knock Floyd out. Where's that Keith Thurman? Now, he's got married. He's calmed down. I know he's had a couple of injuries, but yeah, all the energy and all of that talk is gone. All the "you better not duck me" talk is gone. He doesn't call out fighters anymore. He fights once a year, once every year and a half. Not good enough from Keith. It's not good enough. His biggest loss, his only loss, is the loss to Manny Pacquiao. Manny Pacquiao was 40 plus when he fought Keith Thurman, and he knocked Keith Thurman down in the first round and did enough to win the fight on the UD. That's poor from Keith Thurman. That's very, very poor. I know Manny Pacquiao is an all-time great fighter, but he's 40 plus now. He's not even close to his prime. Keith Thurman should have been dispatching of Pacquiao, but this is what happens when the hunger goes. You lose a little bit in your training, you lose a little bit in your fights, and it shows up. Keith Thurman will be bitterly disappointed with his performance in that fight, and I just don't think he's maximising his career right now. I don't think he's maximising his career. He's not looked like one time in years and years now, and I'm interested to see what happens to Keith now. Does he pack it in? Does he look for the people above him on the list? What's he going to do? We'll see. Number 5 on my list, we have another fighter that I love to watch, and I just respect him because he's always a professional. He's a professional in his training camps. He's a professional the way he talks to his opponents, and he's a professional in the ring. And that is Showtime Porter. He's got a record of 31 wins, 3 losses, and 1 draw. I'd probably say his best win is the Danny Garcia fight. He went in there. It was for the WBC title. He managed to put a rugged-like performance in against Danny. But not only the typical Sean Porter rugged, he used his jab. And Sean Porter was a good amateur. He was on the national team. He was a very good amateur. And crazy, he actually fought Alexander Usyk as an amateur. And Usyk fights at heavyweight now. So Sean was a big boy. I know he started his career at middleweight and sucked down to the welterweight division, which links back to what I said earlier about people trying to make it to these money divisions like welterweight, middleweight, heavyweight and lightweight. So he sucked down to welterweight over a period of fights. And yeah, Sean really put in a nice performance against Danny Garcia. Used his jab, moved, darted in and out, and then was rugged when he needed to be. His biggest loss, and probably his most disappointing loss, was against Kell Brook. He'll be really disappointed with the Kell Brook loss because he was the champion, Kell Brook was a challenger, and I think he overlooked Kell. Kell had been the mandatory for Sean's belt, for the IBF belt for years and years, kept getting injured, kept having to postpone, and I think the American welterweights forgot about Kell, and Kell wasn't fighting any names. He was looking good in some of the fights he had, but he wasn't fighting any names. But Kell, big, strong welterweight, went in there, held his own. It was a very close fight, but for Sean to definitely say he won the fight, he needed to do more. He might have been looking for the champion edge and being like, oh, the challenger has to come and beat the champion properly to take the belt, but that doesn't always have to happen. And Sean will look back on that fight and think, I wish I could have done a little bit more to win that fight. But yeah, he's just a professional in the sport, and he fights everybody. He doesn't make any excuses. He's fought Errol Spence. He's fought Danny Garcia. He's fought Keith Thurman. He's fought Kell Brook, and he wants to fight Terence Crawford. That's the sign of a professional and a great fighter, someone who wants to fight everyone. And I hope he does get the Terence Crawford fight and maybe the Errol Spence rematch. I hope he gets those fights. Next fighter on our list, we have, and I hope I'm saying his name right, Yordenis Ugas. And to any Cubans out there, apologies if I've pronounced the name wrong, but I'm just going to call him Ugas going forward for the rest of this video. He has a record of 26 wins, 4 losses, 0 draws. I'll be honest about Ugas. I haven't seen many of his fights. But he's comes from the Cuban school of boxing. And the thing with these Cuban fighters, they're always very well schooled. In Cuba, if you want to fight out of Cuba, you can't turn professional. And that's because it's, at the moment, still deemed as a communist state. You can't turn professional, and all you can do is fight in the amateur system. And Cuba has some, if not the best amateur boxing system in the whole world, and has had for years and years now. It's produced some top amateurs like Felix Savon, like Guillermo Rigondeaux. These are amazing amateur boxers, and some of the boxers that don't even make it out of the Cuban prelims in Cuba will win gold medals at the Olympics. Like, they don't even make it out of Cuba. So they have a very, very tough amateur school. Even Mike Perez, another amazing amateur. But you can't turn professional. So a lot of these Cuban fighters, they have to abscond. They have to leave Cuba. Maybe they'll go to an Olympics. They'll fight, pick up a medal, but they won't return back to the camp. Or they'll sneak out of Cuba and go to America. Or go. I know Perez went to Ireland. And once they get out of Cuba, then they can turn professional and start fighting. So they've gone through a hard life just to make it as a professional. So I've already got respect for Ugas for having to do anything that he's had to do. Probably leave his family behind to turn professional. His best win is a Thomas Delorme. Thomas Delorme, probably more natural junior welterweight, but I know the fight was at welter, and it's a good name to have on your record. It's one of those fighters that if you can beat a Thomas Delorme, you can sort of start looking up the division rather than down the division. And his biggest loss was the Sean Porter fight, and he held. I've seen that fight, and he held himself to a good account. He looked okay in the fight. He gave Sean all he can handle, and it was an interesting fight. And off that fight, I definitely saw that Ugas can be a player in this welterweight division, and it looks like he's going to be. Number 7 on our list, we have Danny Swift Garcia. He's got a record of 36 wins, 3 losses, and 0 draws. Danny. He's an interesting fighter. He's a Puerto Rican American. He comes out of Philadelphia, which has been known as a great boxing city, and also the city that Rocky's set in, if any of you guys didn't know. And he just comes with a mentality where he doesn't do a lot of talking, but he lets his dad do all the talking. His dad has a big mouthpiece, and he talks hella shit, cash money. That's what he's talking. He will pump up his son and try and deflate his son's opponent with every last bit of energy he has. And I respect that. I respect that his dad rides for him. His dad's also his trainer, and his dad rides for his son. His best win comes at junior welterweight, and it's against Amir Khan. And this is when I first saw Danny Garcia. I didn't really know much about him. And to be honest, I didn't really know much about him whilst the press conference was going on. I knew more about his dad, because his dad was trying to get under Khan's skin. He was calling Khan every name under the sun, saying, my son's going to whoop your ass. My son's going to do this to you. My son's going to do that to you. And he would just, oh boy, he would get onto Khan. And Khan, instead of using his head and thinking, okay, this is all a ploy by the Garcia team, because Khan was the champ and he was coming in with most of the notoriety and most of the backing. But Khan allowed his head to get lost, and he already had a shaky chin. We've seen Khan get knocked down before. We've seen him be knocked out by Brady's Prescott. We knew the chin was suspect, but he allowed the Garcias to get under his skin. And in the fight, Khan rushed in there. Obviously, he's got blazing fast hands, tried to attack Danny, and he did. But one thing about Danny has some of the best balance in boxing, and he has probably one of the best left hooks in boxing as well. I think a weird fact about Danny, he has 6 toes on one feet, so that probably helps him to plant his feet. He's got slow feet, don't get it twisted, he has very slow feet, but his balance and he's so sturdy, he can plant his feet down and throw the left hook. And if you watched a lot of Danny's knockouts, he actually closes his eyes just as he throws it. I don't know if that gives him extra torque on the punch or extra speed, but he closes his eyes just as he throws it, and the way it detonated on Khan's chin, it blew his face up. It was like landing a nuclear warhead on someone's chin. It just blew his face up. Khan just sent spiral into the canvas. He's everywhere, absolutely everywhere. Gets back up, they fight a little bit more, but Khan's just out of it. I think Danny Garcia lands a couple more solid punches, and then referee stops the fight. And that was an example of, you can win a fight in the press conference if you know what you're doing and you know the psychology of the other fighter. You could win a fight in the press conference. But yeah, great win. He was the underdog going into that fight, and it really put Danny Garcia on the map for me. Then he had a fight against Lucas Matisse. That was another really good fight, again at junior welterweight, and he acquitted himself excellently in that fight. Took a couple hard punches from Matisse early, but then just carried on doing his work, doing his boxing, trusting his skills, and he pretty much beat Matisse up going into the later rounds there. His biggest loss is probably the Sean Porter loss. Obviously, he's lost to Keith Thurman. He's lost to Errol Spence. But I'd say the Sean Porter loss, because I think he would have really thought he was going to win that fight. He would have probably been the favourite to win it. But Sean, as I said earlier, just rugged and used his jab and got the best of Danny. Danny at welterweight, he's lost all these big fights. He's lost against Errol Spence. He's lost against Keith Thurman. He's lost against Sean Porter. And I don't really know where he goes from here. I think he's better than the B-level welterweights. But I don't think he's better than any of the A-level welterweights. So it's probably best if he's not packed on too much muscle, to try and maybe move down to junior welterweight. And I think he can put in a bit more work there. But at welterweight, he's between a rock and a hard place. And he's going to have to improve his skills quite heavily if he wants to start competing at the top level again. Number 8 on our list, we have, and to any Uzbeks out there, I'm sorry if I pronounce this name wrong, we have Kudaratilo Abukakarov. And his moniker is the Punisher. So I'm going to go by the moniker the Punisher, so I don't butcher that name. He's someone I don't really know much about. And for him to be on the Ring Magazine top 10, he's obviously putting in his work, diligently getting about his wins. He's got a record of 17 wins, 0 losses, and 0 draws. The name that I recognise on his record is Luis Collazo. And Collazo is a bit old, and some would say a bit over the hill, but he's still a solid, rough fighter. He's been in there against some decent names as well. He's been in there against Keith Thurman. He gave Keith Thurman a huge scare. I remember that fight clear as day. He gave Keith Thurman a huge scare. I think that was the fight Keith had that huge lump, hematoma sticking out of his head. He fought Ricky Hatton. He gave Ricky Hatton a solid fight. He fought Amir Khan. Amir Khan busted him up there, but he fought Amir Khan. So Luis Collazo has been in there with some names. And for the Punisher to get the win over Collazo, it's a good look. It's a good look. He's had no losses, and I really want to see what he does going forward. So I'm going to keep an eye out for you, the Punisher. I'm going to keep an eye out for you. And to all you Uzbeks out there that are pulling for him, give him all the support that he needs so he can build his name. So when he gets the big fights, he gets a fair split of the purses. Number 9, we have Sergey the Samurai Lipinets. And he has a record of 16 wins, 1 loss, and 0 draws. Sergey Lipinets is someone that I have seen coming up, and I would say probably his best feature about him is that he's got a good chin, which is probably not what boxers want to hear. They have a good chin because it means that they take a lot of punches, but he has a good chin. When he was at junior welterweight, and he was trying to block the Undisputed fight between Indongo and Crawford, and I found that quite annoying. I can see it from both points of view. He wanted to definitely guarantee that he was getting a shot at Crawford, or at least for the belt. But from the other side of view, from Crawford's side of view, Crawford wants to get the Undisputed fight on and build his legacy in the sport. One thing I'll say about fighters that do this and try and block Undisputed fights, don't do it. Because really and truly what you should be doing, you should have 2 options. You should either have, you're going to get step-aside money and a guaranteed shot at whoever wins the fight, or a guaranteed shot at the belt if the belt becomes vacant. And your other option is to push, disrupt the Undisputed fight, and try and fight for the belt against the champion. In my opinion, it makes more sense to try and push for that Undisputed shot, because if you take the step-aside money and you fight the guy who's picked up all the belts, then you're getting a shot at all the belts. And you've got the step-aside money as well, so you get paid twice. Even if that fighter then moves up, which is what eventually did happen, Crawford moved up and relinquished all the belts, you're still getting a shot at the belt and you've still been paid twice. So it's a no-brainer to take the step-aside money rather than blocking Undisputed. But, but boxers obviously have their ulterior motives, and they might want to just fight what they perceive as a real champion rather than fighting for a vacant belt. And as I said, I can see a little bit from that point of view. But yeah, Sergey Lipinets, his best win is against Lamont Peterson. Lamont Peterson was a bit washed up by them, but it's still a good guy to have on your record. Lamont Peterson has very nice boxing skills, and to beat Lamont Peterson, you're doing a good job. I think Lamont may have even retired after that fight, but I'm not 100% sure. And his biggest loss came against Mikey Garcia. This really showed an excellent chin, because Mikey was just teeing off on him. He couldn't really do much with Mikey. Mikey was just landing his punches when he wanted at will, but he stayed in there all the way to the end. and Mikey picked up the UD, so he showed a very nice chin in that fight. And last but not least, at number 10 on our list, we have Mikey Garcia. So, Mikey Garcia, he was touted to be a great talent and to do great things in boxing. And he's done really good things in boxing. He started his career at featherweight, then moved up to lightweight, then to welterweight, and then back to junior welterweight. But the thing with Mikey, he missed out on 2 years of his career and through promotional issues. And that was 2 years of his prime. We hate to see boxers losing out on their prime, because boxing is such a small window to make money, and losing out on those 2 years of his prime through promotional issues, that made him take riskier decisions as a boxer, which has probably shortened his career now. So Mikey, best win is Robert Easter, and that was at lightweight. And I would say at lightweight, Mikey looked great. He looked great. He's a very good boxer. He's what I like to call straight up and down, no special effects, but the things that he does well. He's got a good jab. He's got a good right hand. He's got a solid base. He's got a good chin. And he's got decent defense. And it was his jab that won that Robert Easter fight. A very, very nice fight. His biggest loss was where he's had to take the risks because he's missed out on years of his career. He decided to jump up from lightweight, 2 weight divisions straight up to welterweight to fight the strongest guy at welterweight, which is Errol Spence, probably one of the biggest guys at welterweight. There was no way he was going to win that fight, but it was a big money fight. So if he'd have probably had those 2 years, he might not have been pushed into a corner thinking, I need to jump up 2 weight divisions to fight Errol. I could stay at lightweight or jump up 1 weight division to junior welterweight, build myself up, and then have a bit more experience at the weight before I take on someone like Errol Spence. But boxing, you got to feed your family out here. You got people to provide for. So he took the risky decision, jumped up 2 weights. He didn't get knocked out in the fight, which was probably his only props, but he didn't do anything. He just went in there, tried to survive, and came out with a unanimous decision loss. Mikey Garcia, it's a shame what's happened in his career, but he's still got a few more years that he can potentially do something at maybe junior welterweight, and we'll see with Mikey. We'll see. I don't think he's ever going to beat any of the top welters. As I said, I think he's best suited to junior welterweight. So yeah, that's the Ring Magazine top 10 at welterweight, guys. I hope you enjoyed the video. Leave any comments in the comment box, and what other weight divisions you want me to do next. I'm thinking of doing the lightweight division next, because the lightweight division is on absolute flames right now. Absolute flames. Teofimo Lopez, Lomachenko, Gervonta Davis, Ryan Garcia. It's just on flames. Devin Haney. So I'm intrigued to look at the lightweight division next. And yeah, stay tuned. There's more to come. I've got some really interesting things planned going forward. And yeah, share, help me to grow. And thanks for listening, guys. Thank you.